Cliffehaven stopped what they were doing and gathered round in the hope that the growing rumours of an Allied invasion into France had become reality. It was now almost the end of May, and the number of air raids over France and Germany had increased dramatically. As the news of Allied victories in Italy and the Far East came through, the time seemed right to push their advantage and get rid of Hitler and his thugs once and for all. Yet those in charge appeared to have other ideas, and the waiting was getting to Peggy, just as it was for everyone, for there was still no clue as to when the invasion might happen. But it would. It had to if this war was ever to end. She looked up as several squadrons of bombers and fighter planes roared overhead. They'd recently been taking off and landing at nearby Cliff Aerodrome day and night, the bombing campaign over the northern shores of France and into Germany increasing in strength and regularity. Her heart swelled with pride as the heavy-bellied roar of the huge British bombers rattled the window panes and sent a tremor through the walls of the old Victorian terraced houses and in the ground beneath her feet. "Godspeed, and bring you home safely," she murmured. Picking up the empty basket to carry indoors, she took a quavering breath as she thought of her darling Jim, who was fighting the Japs in Burma, her nephew Brendan, who'd be returning to duty with the Royal Naval Reserve tomorrow, and her son-in-law Martin, who'd been shot down and was now a POW in Stalag 3, along with many of his fellow RAF officers. They were so brave, every last one of them, and all she could do was pray that this war would soon be over, and they could return to their loved ones and enjoy the blessed peace which they'd all been denied for too long. Her thoughts automatically went to Matthew Champion, Rita's lovely young pilot, who'd lost his life some months ago in that awful raid over Berlin, which had seen so many die or taken prisoner. Rita was putting on a brave face, throwing herself into her work as a mechanic at the fire station and spending every spare moment raising money for the local Spitfire Fund. But the sadness and awful loss could still be seen in her wan face and haunted dark eyes, and Peggy's heart ached with the knowledge that there was very little she could do to ease the girl's suffering, except to mother and console her. With a tremulous sigh, Peggy stowed the basket away in the scullery, then went up the concrete steps into her deserted kitchen. Ron had done his usual vanishing act with his dog Harvey straight after breakfast. Rita, Ivy and Fran were at work, and Cordelia had gone with Sarah and Peggy's little Daisy into town to see if there was anything worth queuing for in the shops. A faint hope, but one that sprang eternal, regardless of the stark reality of empty shelves. She bustled about, clearing the last of the dishes from the drainer and tidying away Daisy's toys. It was a relief to be able to get on without being hindered by her 2-year-old daughter, who'd lately become rather demanding when she thought she wasn't the centre of attention, an unfortunate result of her being so well entertained by Nanny Pringle and her assistants at the factory nursery. Peggy regarded the shabby kitchen fondly, her gaze drifting over the faded oilcloth on the large table, the mismatched chairs and battered old dresser, which was covered in all sorts of clutter and no doubt gathering dust and cobwebs. The wireless was burbling away to itself, but a glance at the clock told Peggy it would be an hour before the 12 o'clock news came on, unless, of course, there was a special bulletin. She went to the larder in the corner of the kitchen and took out the bowl of pigeon breasts Ron had prepared the night before. He'd been out on the hills at dusk and lain in wait with his shotgun for the pigeons to return to their regular roosts, and had bagged a dozen or more as they'd flown in low on the buffeting wind coming off the sea. There wasn't a lot of meat on a pigeon, and the shotgun pellets had made a bit of a mess of them, but getting meat of any sort was a minor miracle these days, and as Ron had assured her he'd retrieved all the pellets, they would make a fitting farewell meal for Brendan on his last night home. Peggy had offered to host the dinner, because Frank and Pauline's cottage over at Tamarisk Bay wouldn't quite stretch to the occasion. Brendan had had 4 short days of leave, having recently returned from Devon, and his mother, Pauline, had been ecstatic.